Hello, everyone. We're trying not to block. Welcome to our first executive leadership panel here with the Dish Women's Network. I'm Paris Bradley, and this is Michelle Calkins. Thank you so much for joining us. We might have some stragglers, but we figured we'd get the most out of this hour that we could because we have an amazing executive panel here with us today. We have Stegman, we have Rector, we have Rachelle Carpenter, and Tosha Zeitlin. So I'll let them introduce themselves and what you do here at Dish, but also please give us a little bit of insight into your career, how you got here, and why you decided to be on the panel today.
And we will ask, before we let them get started, that we hold questions until the end. We'll have about 15 minutes. That way we can get through. We did prep interviews with all of them, so we have some pretty great questions for you guys. But just a note, too, unless it's a really burning one, try to hold them until the end.
Cool.
Thanks.
Okay. Thanks.
Do you want to get started first?
Yeah, go.
Okay, hi, I'm Stegman. A lot of you guys look familiar, and a lot of you guys are new to me, which is super cool. So I've been at Dish about 10 years this summer. I have been in customer retention the majority of the time. Retention resided in marketing for part of that time and partly in operations. So my job today, I do a lot of the existing customer communication. So anything that you guys see commercial-wise, what's on our website, a lot of our offer development from an operations site we manage. So a lot of really cool stuff. To kind of answer your question, I came from a company called Checks Unlimited down in Colorado Springs, where I worked for about 10 years down there as well. So my background there was marketing operations, call center training, manufacturing operations. So a lot of the same stuff that I do right now. What I love about my job now, it's a little bit of marketing and it's a little bit of operations, and that's kind of what retention is. And so it was kind of a perfect fit when I left that company to come here. So it's a little bit about me.
Awesome. I'm Rector. I head up corporate talent acquisition here at Dish, and so pretty much that means all things recruiting. I oversee our university relations department, our corporate hiring, our website, our media spend, all those fun things, social media networks as well. I've been here, it's actually going to be 6 years tomorrow. I just sat here and did the math. I was like, wait, my anniversary's tomorrow. So 6 years tomorrow, and just a little bit about my background. This is actually my second career life. I started my career as a CPA, so I went to school for accounting and worked in public accounting for several years before transitioning into HR. So that's a little bit about me.
Wow, 6 years, okay. All right, so I'm Rachelle Carpenter. I'm the leader of the CSC HR team, so I have responsibility for all of the 11 owned and operated sites that are out in the field, and the HR and everything involved with the HR that goes along with that, including recruiting. So we do high volume recruiting at all those sites. We hired about 4,200, or we went through about, hired, screened, whatever, ended up with hiring about 4,200 people last year. So really mass hiring there. So my background, I actually came from a staffing company where I worked for about 4 years. It's a really small company out of Michigan. I was living in Kansas City, and we did all the volume hiring for the H&R Block call center, so again, call center reps. Before that, I spent about 8 years at GE, where I went through their leadership development program, and I spent a couple of years going through different parts of the organization and learning about that. And then I spent the bulk of my time at GE in operations in the call center. So I was actually a coach and an operations manager before I moved into the recruiting aspect. And then coming here to Dish, I was the recruiting manager for the CSC, or the customer service organization. And then I moved into the senior HR manager for the West site, so I had responsibility for all of HR for 6 sites, and then I moved into the role I'm currently in today. And I will be with the company, it'll be 5 years in July.
So I'm Tosha Zeitlin. I'm the Director of IT Service Management. We do basically application support for things like Oracle ERP, some of the apps if you guys use FileNet or AutoSys in your current application stack. I've been in IT since 1993. I started in telecommunications, so probably none of you will even know the company, but I started at MCI. So if that rings a bell for anybody in the room, then that's I started there. And diversified and went into traditional operations after about 8 years. So I've been in IT now for, I think that's 23 years. So my math isn't as good. So I came to Dish in 2006. I'm what they call a retread. If any of you have heard that, I've left and come back.
Boomerang.
Yeah, boomerang. There you go. There you go. And so I left thinking the grass was greener because I was like, oh, this is hard. I left and within 4 months was just realized that this was the place I wanted to be because of opportunity, because of growth, because of people, and because we're doing really interesting things in IT. What's that?
I did too.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Okay. So this side of the room. Yeah. So it'll be. I just made 9 years. I guess last August. What was the other part of the question?
Oh, we didn't answer. Why did we agree to be a part of the panel?
Yeah, because I think
We'll go back.
thank you. Yeah, high achiever on this side. Yeah. So the reason that I actually decided to be part of this is because not everything's a traditional path, and I think my path is not traditional. I kind of started out as a business analyst, and then I had a job. I came here for a job. Prior to coming here, I just had my second child, and I was like, I have to have some income. And very quickly, within a couple of years, I said, I actually want a career. And that was a pivot point for me. So I decided to be part of this just to share for those of you that maybe are kind of what do you want to be when you grow up? I think we all kind of do that. I think Val mentioned she's in her second career. You're all going to be there at some point. What do I want to be? And I think just sharing my experience, I thought that would be valuable. So.
Some of the same reasons, but also because I'm just excited we have a women's network here. I'm glad that it includes men and women. I think it's a great opportunity. It's a great thing to have in a company like this. I think so many times, especially as women, we feel like we can't have it all, right? We can't have the career, we can't have families or whatever. And I don't know if that I always do it very successfully, but I have been able to do it. So I wanted to be here and help talk through or answer any questions about my experiences. If I can help someone else, I'd love to be able to do that. So.
I don't know how much more I can add to that. No, that was great. No, I think Rachelle and I joke about having it all a lot. We sit near each other and our friends, and we always joke that it's not pretty, but we do it. And so yeah, just happy to share that experience with other people and lend support to others where we can.
Yeah, I would agree. I don't know if I have anything else to add to what you guys mentioned. It's always good to have just a great support network throughout the business, and to have people around you that say, you've had a really bad day. I'm here to help, or I'm here to answer a question, or I'm here to cheer you up. That's what we're all here for. So, but I would agree with that, with what everybody said.
Well, with that, we'll get into our formal list of questions. The first one, we'll start with you, Kara, and then we would ask, as you guys feel the need to or want to, please chime in. As we were talking last week, something that came up was that success is not always immediate. Yeah. You don't always get it right away, and sometimes setbacks happen. Can you kind of talk through how in your career you've stayed focused, stayed positive when things haven't gone as planned? And then with that, what advice you give for people when they're facing setbacks?
Yeah. As we were talking last week, I'm not a boomerang, even though I have thought on many occasions not to stay here, which I think we all have. As we giggle at that, that's just being real. I think I kind of have a rule of thumb with my team of 80 to 90% of the time, if you really love what you're doing, that it's a great place. You're always going to have that 10% of the time where you're like,
no job is perfect.
You drive into the parking lot, you're like, oh, dude, what am I doing today? But one of the things that I can share with you guys is when I got promoted to director about 2 years ago, there was a couple of years in a row that I was not, even though I was up to be promoted. And it's hard. It's hard when you have that element of you're up for it, and you know that you are still working as hard as you can, but at the end of the day, it just doesn't happen. And I had a couple years in a row where I had colleagues around me get promoted, and then other years where it didn't happen, and it didn't happen for a handful of reasons. And those are really hard days. I will tell you that, because there's nothing worse than feeling like you're doing the best job that you can do, but it just doesn't happen. But one of the pieces of advice that I could share with you, and I've learned this all along my career from other people, both men and women. Typically, when you focus so much on the promotion, or so much on that pay raise, or so much on those things that you think are tangible, they don't happen. You need to focus on doing your job really well and getting the most out of your job of feeling passionate about what you do and being happy in the workplace. And I've experienced over my 20 years in the workforce that when you focus on the right things, all that other stuff happens. Yeah. You will get promoted, you will get the pay raises, you will get the responsibility, you will get all those things when you just focus on working hard. But it's not been easy, and there's challenges that you guys are all going to have all throughout your career where it doesn't go as planned, and you just have to say, okay, I'm upset right now, I'm angry right now, I'm maybe pissed off right now, but at the end of the day, you can do that for a little bit of time, and then you got to focus on what's at hand. And I've learned that, over my 20-odd years. There are days that you just have to kind of plug through it. So that would be my piece of advice I would give you guys. Yeah. What else? Yeah, I think that answers. Yeah,
because I was in a similar situation. I was overseeing the 11 O&O sites well before I was promoted to director, and I got passed over as well. And it's frustrating. It's hard, and you get angry, and you're like, what else could I have done? But at the end of the day, like Kara said, you have to just stay the course, and you have to focus on what are you doing, and are you doing the best job possible? What else can you be doing? And frankly, I just took it as another reason to drive.
Mm-hmm. It's a personal choice.
I'm a results oriented. I drive, and I just became even more of a driver and proved to the company that I was worth it. And you do. But it's hard, and it's hard to stay positive, and it's hard to not be frustrated yourself. But it's also okay. It's okay to be upset. It's okay to be angry. It's okay to be frustrated. It's okay to have your bad day, but you got to pick yourself back up, and you got to move forward too, right? You can't wallow in it, and you can't be woe is me and all that. Especially here, there's too much work to do, too much stuff to get done, too many opportunities to take grasp of too.
Mm-hmm. It's a personal choice how you're going to show up and how you can mentally wrap yourself around some of those disappointments, kind of get through it, and then pick yourself up by the bootstraps and keep going. That's one of the things that I've learned, and I think I'm in the same boat. I mean, it took me 5 years from the time I said I wanted a career till they actually promoted me, which there were not just days but months that I was discouraged, but every day I showed up with my personal best, and so I think I think when you're a culture fit when these type of things are talked about, and you're like, oh yeah, I totally can get up and I can actually show up. I can walk in the door and bring my best, even when deep inside I'm really feeling maybe some days that are not so great. So,
It reminds me of one of my favorite quotes is, there's no such thing as luck, and luck is when preparation meets opportunity. Mm-hmm. And I love that quote, and I mean, totally, I think that echoes what you guys are talking about, just being prepared and continuing to move forward, and good things happen. Yeah. I'm a big believer in that, for sure.
And it's a business, right? I mean, we all know this is a business. I mean, choices and decisions are made.
It's not always a personal thing.
It's not personal. Yeah.
It's hard not to take it that way.
Sometimes it feels that way.
Really hard not to take it that way.
Yeah. And I think it's important to surround yourself with people, because I had people around me go, get your head in the game, focus on what you're trying to accomplish. At some point it will come. And so you got to have people around you that are honest and kind of forthright to say, hey, get your head out of the clouds, continue to kind of plug away. And so it's important to have people around you that support you and tell you honestly what's happening. So.
In Val, last week we talked a lot about networking and how big of a role it's played within your career. Could you tell us a little bit about that, and then also give some advice to people about how to best maintain your network?
Sure. I think everybody talks about networking, right? And I think one of the best pieces of advice, and I give this all the time particularly when I get to the chance to speak on college campuses, is you never turn down interviews. You only turn down offers. Like, you talk to everyone who wants to talk to you, because you just never know what will happen. And I've been really lucky starting out in public accounting. So I started working with Arthur Andersen and then transitioned to KPMG. It's a huge network, and pretty much every job I have found, literally every job I have found, has been in some way connected through that network. Someone who made an introduction for me or who thought of me. And it's really hard to maintain it, because I think networking takes a ton of time, and I'll be honest, I don't do as good a job at it as I probably should. I think the one thing that I try to do, and I don't do it always, but I really try to reach out to 2 people a month. And just, if it's a quick email or it's a quick phone call, I feel like 2 a month is pretty reasonable. It doesn't feel overwhelming. It's not necessarily 2 lunches. It doesn't have to be face-to-face. And I just try to, whenever I think of someone, I try to let them know. And that's just a really simple thing, whether it's a quick text or like, hey, I saw this, I heard this song today, and it reminded me of you, or whatever. And just a quick little, it doesn't have to be a novel about yourself, but just a way to stay connected to people. So when you need something, or need a favor, or realize they work at a company, or you can make a connection for someone else, that you've at least touched base with them within the past 12 months. Sometimes it goes longer. Like I said, I'm not always great at practicing what I preach, but I try. I really try. I have got my 2 in for March already, though. I will say that. Yeah, I will say that.
Definitely follow that advice. I need to take it. I'm really bad at networking.
It's hard.
Really,
It's really hard.
bad.
It's really hard. It's hard.
And
You realize it when you need something,
Right.
and you reach out to
Yes.
somebody and you're like, I haven't talked to you in 2 years. Darn, like that's like a really bad feeling.
People get that. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
yeah. I think generally people get it. We're
And
busy
you know the
and
people that are
whatnot.
good. They're the people that reach out to you, and so model yourself after them. I would say everything that I do today that I've talked about in here, I've gotten from someone else. I didn't intuitively come. So these type of events where you're listening to stuff, I mean, model other people's behavior that you're like, wow, they're doing this thing. How do I get in on that? And it's not like you're copying. I mean, all successes were in some way already happened, whether it be industry or whatever. So people, how they network, that's good. Twice a month,
Yeah.
That's
Just
impressive.
two. Just
Yeah,
two.
two
Two
things.
emails, 2 phone calls, 2 texts. It's not, you know.
I do the lunch thing more.
Yeah.
I'm more of a
It's hard for me to
face-to-face
do lunch.
person.
Yeah.
My once a week out of the building. When was the last time we went to lunch?
When do we get lunch?
It's been at least 6 months.
I waved at you, I think.
I think so. With something in your mouth.
So Tosha, that kind of actually progresses right into our next question. You were just talking about how everything that you've said basically has come from someone else. You talked to us. You've talked to us.
I can vouch for her. She's very original.
So more delicately, from maybe a career coach, can you talk to us about how you continue to learn and grow in your job? You do work with a career coach. What does that look like? And what are some of the valuable pieces that you've learned that you could share with the group?
Sure. I will say that if we were to flip this around and 20 years ago I was in the room, I wouldn't be garnering the same things that I get from my experiences today. I've definitely matured quite a bit from the time that I started out in my career. And I think that's why a lot of times I ask for resources, I ask people what their successes are, I read lots of books, I'm very into self-development. And one of the things for me is I go back to the same things over and over. Like, I'm not really great with time management, so I find people that are really good with time management, and I will reach out to them and what's your success? And I'll ask for, what makes you successful? And so I think for me it's been a personal choice to become a learner, to better myself. And if I wasn't actually doing it myself, nobody's going to tap me on the shoulder and say, hey, I think you should do X, Y, and Z. So I ask lots of questions. And the coaching that I have a mentor and a coach, didn't come from me asking for it. Like I didn't say, oh, I want a mentor. This person just started taking me under their wing. And then all of a sudden I'm like, would you be my mentor? And they're like, what do you think I am? I was like, oh. So if you see someone taking interest in you, or somebody's giving you advice that you're like, I really like that, or maybe you come to one of these presentations and you're like, wow, Rachelle, like really that maps to kind of the way that I reach out. I mean, it doesn't mean that person necessarily has the time, but you could get that one little nugget that could help you in your growth as you mature and become who you want to be when you grow up. So, and then the other thing is, I think you need to advocate. It's one of the things from my perspective. Since I've worked at Dish, I've had 14 different managers in 9 years. And I quoted the other day 17. I think one of my employees is in here, so I have to make sure I correct myself. But I've had 14 different management chains. I'm not afraid of change. And so for me, that change actually helps me learn. And every situation, there have been jobs I've been put in that I'm like, oh, I just don't know if this is for me. But I decide there's got to be some learning in this. And so I go into every situation with myself dedicated to learning something from it. And I get out of it every single time I've gotten out of it, learning more than I ever thought I could. So.
I think for my career, I've done just that, but I've done it in a way of like, I'm the one who raised my hand for the projects nobody else wants, right? Or the areas that no one else has interest in, right? Or sometimes you're voluntold things, right? And then I always take that as a great thing. Yep. But I think along my my career path, I think that's how I've always been able to get to the next level or get to the next position, because I've been able to broaden what I know and my knowledge and what I've learned, and then take it with me. And now, I'm in a role that honestly I feel like is a perfect fit for me. It's a culmination of my operations and my call center experience. It's a culmination of what I know in HR and high volume recruiting and what I'm learning along the way. But I still raise my hands for the projects that nobody wants to do, or even if people want to do them, I'm like trying to put my hand in front of them, right? Because that's how I learn, that's how I grow, that's how I've gotten to where I've gotten, and I feel like it's worked for me. So I always see every opportunity different roles that I'm put in that I'm like, oh, I don't know if that's a really great role for me.
And it stretches
good luck.
you. You grow a lot when you're in situations where, I mean, we talked about this in one of the previous sessions, you know, that imposter syndrome where you get into a situation where a new job and you're like, I don't know how I got here, but I'm gonna make this happen. And then all of a sudden you realize you're doing it and you're like, oh my gosh, and you know, you get some confidence. And all the projects that I have taken on and I've raised my hand for have gotten me to the place where people are like, oh, you can do this and you can do this, and you're very diverse and you want to be able to be thought of when they're thinking of the next big thing. I like shiny objects. I like to be on the next big project. It's part of my drive. I'll do all the day-to-day. I call this my day job. This is my night job. And I love going home, and not all the time. I mean, it goes in waves, but I love being on the thing that kind of stretches me just enough. But advocating is really key.
Being uncomfortable is good. It really is. I can speak, you know, and I mentioned to both these ladies on Thursday, Friday, that one of the first kind of like almost stuck up moments in my career that I was in my early 20s, and I kept getting passed over to be a manager. And I was like, I want to be a manager, I want to be a manager, I want to be a manager. And this was at my old company. And I remember being told, you know, you're not ready, you don't have this experience, you don't have that experience. And then all of a sudden somebody came to me, and it was a manager at the time who was a not supportive manager, and said, you're going to be a manager. And they put me, I was in a marketing department, they put me in a manufacturing environment with 67 extremely tenured employees. So I would say 90% of the workforce was men who had been there 20 years plus, that were maybe 50 to 60 years of age. And the person that moved me, I think, had the intent to say, you asked for it, I'm going to give it to you. And at that moment I realized, holy crap, what just happened? And in my head I thought, well, I sort of asked for this. And I had that holy crap moment where, like, I'm really scared to do this, and then I realized I had to flip the switch to try to figure it out. And had to be walked to my car at night, had to change my phone number, had to do a bunch of different things that is not the fun part of it. But I will share with you guys that at that point in time I realized I was being put into a really uncomfortable situation, and how I work, I was like, no, I'm gonna figure this out. I'm gonna figure it out. And I literally figured it out. And it was my first time managing. I had, again, I remember 67 hourly employees and a manufacturing department, which I had no experience in. And it was the uncomfortable moment where I realized, no, this is how it is. I'm going to make this work, and I'm going to show them that I'm going to make it work. And then from that, I then moved to a bigger department where I had 170 hourly employees. But at that moment, I realized you got to embrace the change. You got to embrace the being uncomfortable, all these things that are totally outside your comfort zone, and focus on, I'm going to figure it out. I'm going to make it work. And it's a great example of that, to where we've all had these experiences where, it's just outside of your normal comfort zone. And I would challenge all of you guys that embrace that at times. Be uncomfortable. Surround yourself with people that are supporting you in those situations, but go outside of your comfort zone and outside the norm, because from my experience, it's been hugely beneficial for me. And from all of what you guys are saying as well, I mean, it's hugely beneficial.
I think you made a really great point, is the people around you. Surround yourself with people who are supportive. Just because you're not being made that manager right away, or someone's telling you you're not ready for that next step, and they're telling you all the things you need to do to get there, doesn't mean they're not being supportive. I had something very similar. Our site leader in GE told me, absolutely, you're not going to be a manager. I'm never going to promote you into this role until you do this role first. And I'm just like, I don't want to do that role. I did that role for 2 months during a rotation, and she's just like, 2 months during a rotation doesn't tell you how to handle and how to manage people. It was being a coach, And in the end, she was very supportive. She was very supportive of my career. She's the one who actually helped to get me promoted initially, but she was very supportive. At the time, I didn't think she was supportive at all. But those are the ones who typically end up being supportive, because they're putting you on the right path. So I agree. Take advantage of that.
The same thing is, just because you think you're ready, if the person that is your boss is giving you feedback that maybe you're not ready, whether it's perception, whether you truly feel that way about yourself, dig deep, figure out what is it that I want to do, what is it that I want to prove. They're not going to get me.
I'm going to go ready. I will
changing your phone number and being walked out to your car is pretty extreme, just for me. Yeah. I was like, wow, I want to hear more about that on next session, right?
Don't need a potlucks. I could just continue the list.
But I do think just because you think you're ready, really pay attention to the feedback that you're getting, because it really does. It'll grow you, and hopefully, if they don't if you really are ready and you're hearing it from everybody else and your boss isn't promoting you, then you figure out kind of, do you have to seek something outside? But yeah, we're going to talk about feedback in a little while. So.
Well, Rachelle, you mentioned earlier about finding balance in life, and I think that's a big question we get at the network is how do we balance it all? Can you talk a little bit about that, if you do, or what advice you would give here today?
I don't know if you want my advice. So I'll just give you a little bit of history of what, so balancing, to me, we were talking, when I was talking with the ladies, I think you can have it all, but what that means, it doesn't mean it's going to be balanced. So if you think you're going to have a work-life balance and have it all, I don't know. I haven't found the magic sauce.
We're all like
yeah, just put it that way. So sometimes I'm really great at my career and I'm really focused on my career. My career takes a lot of my time, but on the other end, my family is suffering, right? I'm not spending as much time with my kiddos. I'm not spending them as much time at home. I'm missing some events. But I've made the decision in my life that that's okay because I want a career and I wanted a family, and I have my husband's very supportive of that as well, and so we've just worked through that. And but it definitely means I am not a 50-50 at all times. Sometimes I'm much more focused on my career. It totally depends on what's going on at work, on when I'm focused. Right now, I'm just a little personal, I have 2 kids. My husband is in Afghanistan right now, and he's been gone since October 31st, and he returns in November. So I'm managing a career, running all the CSC HR teams. I am managing my 2 kids at home and them being without their dad, and me being without my partner in my life. And it's really hard. I'm not gonna lie, it's really, really hard. But what I do is I just make choices, right? So some days I might not be able to stay late at work because I got to get home and go to my kid's baseball game, right? Or sometimes I may miss baseball practice because I need to stay at work and finish something. So I'm constantly, literally every single day doing this. And I think that doesn't matter if your husband or partner is in Afghanistan or if they're here with you. I think if you choose whether it's children or not children, just like life outside of work, right? When I was younger and I didn't have kids, or before my husband, I've never been very good at being balanced, but that's a choice I make. And I'm okay with that choice. So I think what I would say, and I guess my best piece of advice is, you have to be okay with where you are, and you have to be okay that sometimes you might be on the career end, sometimes you might be on the life end, whatever life means, right? And I think you just have to be okay with that. And there are different choices you have to make, different decisions, different things. Yeah, are you gonna, have to pass up on some things? Maybe if you're on the life side of things, that's a little bit heavier in your life right now than the work, then maybe you can't do certain things, right? Like I can't drive my career as hard as I want to right now to get me to the next level. I'm not stopping here, right? I want to go on. I'm still on the upward trend for my career, at least in my mind I am. I don't know. I guess that's a PA discussion with my boss, but and so I'm not stopping. But it's definitely, I'm not able to do some of the things that I'd like to be doing or spend as much time as I'd like to be spending. And it also means how I spend my time is different. I am here in the building when I need to be here in the building. I am at home with my kids. When my kids go to bed, I'm probably booting up my email, and I'm probably getting back online and finishing some things and sending out some emails. Do I want to go to bed? Yep, sure do, but I might have to get some work done. So it just looks differently. And I think that's balance, I guess, for me. So Val was saying, like, we always joke about it, like we're not very good at it, and I think it's a give and take constantly. So
that totally is. I mean, we all had the same conversation before this started because we all have kids, we all have careers. It's a daily challenge, and challenge is the right word, I think, to use. What's worked for me here is, number one, being comfortable with it. When I first, I have a 5.5-year-old and a 18-month, almost 19-month-old little girl, and I waited a really long time in my life to have kids. I focused on my career, and I think I got to the point where I realized that my kids were more important than my job, and I would have never said that out of my mouth in my 20s and 30s. No. Now I'm aging myself, but I would have never vocalized that, and I had to get to a point where I'm like, wait a minute, that is true. Like, and then secondarily, it's having open dialogue with the people around you to say, I'm comfortable saying out loud, I can't be in an executive meeting because I have to go to my child's, parent-teacher conference, and being okay with that, and not having guilt, I think is probably and I touched my mic, sorry. not having guilt, because a lot of us, especially as females, have that guilt moment where I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm supposed to be here right now, but in my mind, in my heart of hearts, I know I'm supposed to be somewhere else. And it's being okay to vocalize that, but still perform at your job. I think that that's probably the best advice I could give you guys here is, number one, be comfortable. Number two, communicate it. Have open dialogue, because a lot of people will sit in their office and say, I can't ask to leave. I can't ask to go do that. And yeah, you can. You can, and you got to be comfortable with that. And sometimes, it requires logging in at night, but it's being able to be focused and perform at your job, but also try to figure it out on the other end. And we giggle, but I mean, there are nights where I have cereal for dinner. Like you make those choices in life, and that's not. And you all are laughing at me because you do the same thing. And I know a lot of you guys have kids.
Wine, but
yeah, exactly. Cereal, wine, like either end. And a lot of you guys out in the audience have kids as well, so you know what I'm talking about. But at the end of the day, you make choices, and it's being comfortable with those choices and being able to not feel that guilt, I think, at times is the hardest thing.
Yeah. Know your priorities. Right?
Absolutely.
I mean, and be okay with your priorities. The other thing that I notice, and we giggle and we all kind of seem to have the same, if you talk to people around you, you'll find you're not so different than what other people are going through. Sometimes you feel alone or guilt, or you're like, my balance, or my husband hasn't seen me in months, or whatever it might be. But if you talk to other people, you start realizing, wow, it's actually pervasive. Everybody has those prioritizations and those feelings. And not that you don't want anybody else to feel that way, but it makes you feel better to be like, oh, I'm not alone, and I can talk about how do you handle that situation? Oh, you eat cereal? Gosh, so maybe we should have cereal at one night a week so I could get stuff done. You start to change your life, and you get your family on board, whether it be your dogs, you start walking them at 8 o'clock at night, whatever that thing is in your life that you prioritize, then you just start making that okay and own it.
Yeah,
I think owning that
is really important. The whole super mom persona, right? How am I gonna bake the cupcakes, the perfectly decorated cupcakes for school that day, and get my project done for work? And no, I go to King Supers and right?
I put them in the handheld
right?
carrier.
But to be okay with that, and I serve my kids cereal for dinner, and okay, they didn't get a vegetable today. Okay, we're all doing the best we can, but I think you have to find what fits for you and sort of let go of some of the idyllic, vision of what that looks like. It's not there. It's not there.
It's a facade.
No.
Yeah. It's not real.
Yeah.
So Kara started talking about communication and how important it is on her team. Tosha, we talked to you a lot about how you give feedback to your team, and then also how to receive it. I think something that we hear a lot in the network is, how do I go out and get feedback? How can I elicit feedback from my peers, from my boss? Could you talk to us a little bit about what that looks like on your team and recommendations that you have?
Sure. First of all, I would say feedback is a difficult thing. If you think of giving feedback to somebody, you're all of a sudden, you want to give them the most positive thing to say, because it's like this, oh, I want to make them happy. You don't really want to tell them the thing that you noticed in the meeting. They were maybe abrupt or whatever that might be. It's very difficult to give it. I will say that feedback requires you to be mature. And we all come to work every day and we think we're mature until somebody gives us a critical piece of feedback. And then we're like, oh my gosh, can you believe this person? It can ruin a relationship in a matter of seconds. So I would say be mature, whether you're asking for it or you're just receiving feedback. You have to go into it with at least up front, that the person is being honest, that they have no ill will. And if you go into it thinking this person is giving me feedback, do it just like you would give feedback. You would go into it saying, I really want to help this person. You're not telling them feedback because you think, gosh, I really want to make this person feel bad about themselves. If you're doing that, then reevaluate. do a little internal. But that's part of that maturity. So what I would say is I haven't received feedback. I actually mentioned to somebody, you mentioned PAs. I have not received a written PA. This will be my 4th year if I don't get one. So it's hard to give people feedback. It's also hard if you're not receiving it. So being that I've said before, I'm a constant learner, I want to be constantly learning. I'm really worried about, not worried, and I don't want it to sound like I'm sitting at home twiddling my thumbs worried about what people think, but I want that to know what the perception of me is. How did I show up? How did you think that meeting went? Did you think I was being open to communication? And I ask a lot of those questions of people. People have a really hard time giving me feedback, and I think there's this whole, oh, you're the manager, or you're not my peer, you're one up, or whatever that might be. So I actually this year, year, I started doing, well, last year when I went into being a director, I actually met with all of my individual contributors, and which at the time was 42 people. I met with them each individually, got to know them, and then, really ask them what they're trying to work on with themselves, because it's me giving you feedback and saying, you sitting there with your arms crossed, I'm not sure if you really, are you upset? Right, I'm just using that as an example. You may not care, right? You might be like, who do you think you are? But if you said, I want to know how people visually think about me, then I'd say, well, when you cross your arms, I might think that you're kind of being critical. I don't know if I would say that, but we would have a dialogue of what you're trying to learn. So I do that with my employees, and then the next year I ask the same questions, and I kind of figure out, have we moved the needle? What else are you working on? Have you matured maybe on something, and now you really don't care what I think about you? You're thinking about how do people above me perceive you? And so now, and I really try to work on feedback from more of the personal aspect. Within myself, I also went to my direct managers this year, and I said I wanted a 3x3. So I said because I'm not getting enough feedback, I was like, I need to know what are my things I'm doing well and what are the things that I really need to work on. And they gave me 3 things that are doing really well, and then I got the feedback, well, there's really not anything that you could work on. And I was like, go back. You need to think of something. And I got some really good feedback, but it's hard to take, right? Because now I'm like, who do you think you are? Like, you're going to tell me, right? But I had to be mature, and I had to listen to what that person said to me. And then what it created was a dialogue with that person. And the next time that situation arose, that they told me that it's really great, Tosha, when you're in your office and I'm sitting at the table and the door's closed, and you take an extra 5 or 10 minutes with me. I so cherish that time because I really enjoy our dialogue. But when I'm standing outside your office and I'm looking in the little sliver of the window, I really hate being outside for 10 minutes waiting for the person who's sitting in the chair. I was like, oh my gosh, am I that late all the time? So time management came up again, and I think we're working on 23 years of time management as being an issue with me. And so I was like, I had to really be critical of myself, own that message. I asked for it, first of all. Second of all, they were already thinking that, right? They were already thinking that perception. They already had that feedback. They just weren't sure if I was open to it. So as I started noticing this pattern, the person sitting in the chair, I said, I'm really sorry, I have another meeting. I watch the clock like a hawk now. It probably is really distracting. But I'm really trying to own that message, because if I take feedback and then I do nothing with it, whether I discount it as this person maybe doesn't have good intent or whatever, or maybe they have good intent, but that's not really what however you look at feedback, own the message, own this piece. And for me, I've just been really taking it seriously. And you'll know when you're ready for feedback, you'll ask for it. And when you don't get it, you'll be really upset. Because I think that's the big thing, is if you're growing, it means something.
And perception's reality. So you may
And
not
I
like
wrote
the
that down
feedback,
here.
but if that's the
Yep.
perception,
Yep.
you'd better dig deep and take it in.
I would say ask.
Oh yeah.
Ask up.
Yep.
Yeah.
Always ask down. Ask all around. I know that sounds weird, like a weird analogy, but you're always going to typically get it from your boss. But going below you and even around, like the people around you, and just read it. You'll be in a meeting and they'll have scrunchy face or they'll have nonverbals, and you're like, wait a minute, did I say something off? You guys know you're in meetings all the time. You have one-on-one dialogue all the time. I would just ask. And sometimes it's amazing what people will tell you. They'll be like, dude, you're making me afraid of you. Or you'll hear stuff where you're like, oh my gosh, I would have never known I was doing that. But ask, because there are people that will tell you honestly. Mm-hmm. So.
And there's also the 360s. Mm-hmm. Those are good, anonymous tools that you could do. I just got one back, so I'm looking forward to working with that. Getting better as a leader.
And I personally, people can tell me all the great things. You're really good at this, you're really good at that. I'm like, and then they say one thing that's like, you need to work on this area. And it's almost like they said nothing else. Like all of those, the sandwich method where they say a good thing, they give you feedback, and then they say, but you're really doing good over here. And I'm like, yeah, it's like, there's one thing. So that's part of my constantly trying to learn and better myself, is I know myself. And I'll even tell people, thank you for the really nice things. I have a hard time taking feedback positive, but when you give me that thing, know that I'm taking it to heart.
I think if you manage people too, the one thing you have to remember is you can't retaliate or act differently when somebody gives you some tough feedback, or you will never get it again.
Yeah.
And one of the things I always tell my team is that my boss can give me a lot of great feedback, and he does, and he will. But I don't manage him every day, and I don't sometimes talk to him every day, right? So the best people to give me the feedback to make me better as a leader are going to be the people I interact with every single day. So it's my business partners, and it's also the people who report to me. And we're at work so many hours during the day, and we're away from our lives and away from our families that I love my job. Like Kara was saying earlier, there's maybe 5 or 10% of the time where I come in thinking, oh my God, I gotta go in here. But I don't even know if it's that, maybe 5% of the time. But I truly, truly love my job. And for me, it's really important that everybody on my team loves their job. And if they don't, the only way that I can fix that is if they tell me what's going on. So whether it's being honest in the engagement survey or telling me personally, I do skip levels with my entire team every quarter because I want to know. And I always ask them, and they try to do the same thing, like, no, there's really nothing. And I'm push them really hard to get something, because I want to make sure that the environment that they're coming into and being on my team is the best that I can make it for what I can control. But I can tell you, I don't think you could ask anyone who reports to me or reports up through me has ever felt like I've retaliated once they've given me that feedback. That's something I learned a long, long time ago, because if you ask for it, you have got to be willing to accept it, and then you need to do something about it, and you can't take it out on the person who gave it to you, because you will never get it again.
Yeah. It's a good one.
Kara, we talked a little bit about this last week, about how some women feel like they need to take on masculine traits in order to be a successful leader. Can you talk to us about your own personal traits as a female leader?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, as a female leader here, especially when I first started, you had to be really direct and aggressive and kind of the B word, to be honest with you. And, what I've learned over time is sometimes that works really well. Sometimes it works really not well at all. And I've made a lot of mistakes here in my career where I've gone into a meeting and been really pushy or really direct or really aggressive. And then I've gotten out of the meeting thinking, I didn't need to take that approach. I could have just taken the positive, nice approach and gotten the same result. And now I have to do damage control with a team of people that I was too pushy with. And my advice would be that I'm not going to say don't be direct and aggressive, because that's the wrong message to communicate. But I think as a female, you have to be able to know when that's appropriate and when that's not appropriate. And the time that I've been here, that's one of probably my biggest challenges at times is, as I've moved further up and I've watched other business leaders, especially female leaders here, there's times where I realize I don't want to be that way. And I don't want to have that moment where people around me go, well, she's only gotten to where she's at because, she's a B. Like, I don't want to have that. Like, I want people to go, she's gotten where she's gotten to because she works really hard and people respect her, and she knows how to get her job done, and she has people that want to work for her, and all those things that all of you guys, as you're sitting here, are probably important to you as well. Like, but it's a balance. And I will tell you that I've made more mistakes here than probably a lot of people have as I've worked my way up of making some of those poor judgment calls, of going into a meeting with more of an aggressive approach, or more of not a positive intent, more of I'm just going to get to the answer that I want to get to, or get to the solution that I want to get to, not realizing that other people have feedback as well. And that's probably one of my biggest learning lessons here, of you don't have to take that approach every single meeting that you have. So just words of advice. Mistakes I've made.
Nice in the meeting will take twice as long, so people go that other
Agree.
approach, because if you have to go all the way around and find out how everybody feels about, right? So sometimes it's like I just have to be that way. But I agree with that. I've probably the times that I've blown up. Some of you may have been in some of those meetings. The times that I have blown up, I'm not exactly proud of it later. But one of the things one of my employees, in one of my pieces of feedback that I received, was that even when I do have those moments where I that comes out of me, where I just cannot believe, I'm like, is this for real? Is this really happening? I always do my damage control. I'll come back and say, you know what, this wasn't personal. Because it's not about breaking people down for me. Sometimes it's just, we don't have time. This is a really aggressive environment, and not people aggressive, just timelines are what they are. So but I do think not being yourself. So if you're somebody outside of here different than you are when you come in the door, it's going to be really hard to maintain. I tend to pride myself in who I am outside of here is who I am inside of here.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. You have to be yourself. You have to be yourself.
Yep.
right?
Yeah.
You can't. It comes back to bite you when you're not.
It does. It totally does.
Whether someone points it out or you know it internally,
Yep.
you know it, and you just have to be yourself. And everybody has a different way of influencing. And for me personally, that's one of the things I absolutely love to try to figure out about people is what makes them tick, and how can I get the one person that I know is not behind the initiative that I want to push through, and how can I win them over? Is it around data? Is it around, what is it around? And so I think really thinking carefully about your influencing skills and knowing your audience is really important.
And it's amazing. I have a tendency, and I think anybody that's driven has a tendency to go into a meeting or get asked a question, and it's like, I'm going to tell you exactly what I would do and how I would do it. And it is amazing when you stop that mentality and say, well, what would you do? Or what do you suggest? Or what do you think? Or I need your help. Turning it on its side, it's amazing how much more buy-in you can get from a team or people that you're working with. By taking that mentality, but to your point, it takes time to do that, and you have to mentally go, okay, I know the answer, but I don't need to regurgitate the answer out. I need to ask them what they should be doing.
You usually find out probably in the 80% or above, you're probably both thinking the same thing, and you're going to get a win-win. You go in, and a lot of times I used to go in and go, well, you're probably thinking, and then they go, so you go in and then you say, well, what are you thinking? And they tell you, and you're like, yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Exactly.
So you find there's a quick win usually in taking that approach. But it does take time.
It does.
Yeah.
Yep.
So each of you guys, at some point in your career or currently, have utilized a training program or a coach or a mentor. Would you guys each just maybe share a quick tidbit that you learned from that, or advice on how to kind of go after one of those areas?
Okay. You guys want to start on that end?
Thinking. I mentioned mine earlier. I didn't really realize I had a mentor until I kind of thought I should formally ask for a mentor, and then, oh, isn't that what I'm doing? I didn't even know I needed a mentor until I actually decided I wanted a career, because then all of a sudden I realized, wow, there's successful things out there. There's patterns to the way you learn things. There's patterns to leadership. And so by asking someone who's already forged through that, you can get direction, you can get information, you can get personal information. Now, one of the things that I did do is I asked for a coach, and this was a professional coach, and I specifically asked for that because even though my undergrad is in computer information systems, if you are in IT for very long, you realize you got to know the technical aspects of it, and I'm not as technical. I'm technical to a certain degree, a little more broad. I was like, how am I going to lead in this organization? So I asked for a coach, and I have a CIO executive coach who coaches me. And my number one advice for any of you that seeks out mentoring coach is be honest. You're not there to tell this person what they want to hear because you need to convince them that you're a fantastic person and that you already have it figured out. Because if you have it figured out, you wouldn't need coaching or mentoring. So when you go into that situation, be vulnerable. Tell them what your things that you really want to learn are, because if you aren't willing to express those things, then don't waste your time. You're not ready. So when you actually go to talk to somebody, be the type of person who's going to say, hey, this is actually really difficult for me. I started with my coach before I got promoted. I'm like, I'm not getting promoted. This company pays for this coach. She literally said, well, what is your time frame? I was like, oh. Nobody asked me about my time frame. What is my time frame? 5 years ago. It was like a really challenging question. I went, wow, okay, well, I'm still learning. And so I realized within myself that even if I didn't get promoted, I wasn't stagnant. And so she was able to show things within myself that I was still getting what I needed out of the job. I wasn't just sitting there waiting for somebody to tap me on the shoulder. And so I think it's really good when you're willing to be open, you'll get that real open feedback, and somebody can actually challenge you on kind of why are you thinking the way you think. And so
I need to get myself a coach and mentor. I do not currently have one.
She's amazing. Yeah.
I've just used people in my life throughout my career. I've never really had an official mentor or official coach. Which sounds like I need to, so I guess I'm going to look into that now. But I try to utilize the people around me. I use my peers a ton. So if I'm just looking at a different way to approach a situation, I'll bounce it off of Val, or I'll bounce it off of Kristen, or Tosha and I will talk a lot about different situations as well, and so I do that. And then I also just try to watch people, and so I'll watch other leaders in the company and how they handle a situation, and I may be in a meeting and I may be like, note to self, do not do that.
Do not do that. That's usually what
Or do that, right? Or if I see other people and I kind of just start stealing stuff from other people. So I don't really have anything official or anything like that in place, but I try to learn from everybody around me. I learn from the people who report to me. I report to the people who are above me. I just try to take it as a learning all the time of things to do and don't do, and that's really what I've done. I had my boss at GE was a female, and she was a strong influence in my life really early on in my career. So I think she helped mold me, when I was younger. And I've just kind of taken that and built on it. And then I've just really tried to look at what do I like and what don't I like about different leaders in any organization that I work in, and I just try to take some bits and pieces from that. And I'll read some good books here and there and take some little bits and pieces and things like that. But that's nothing grand.
You know when something feels right for you.
Yeah.
Like when something feels like you could actually use that thing. You're like, oh, so you'll go into like a full leadership type thing, or you'll be around people and you'll be like, oh, I'm gonna grab that little thing. And it could be, a 3-day thing, and you grab like this one thing they talked about for 5 minutes, and you're like, I'm gonna put that in my pocket. Like there's things that are gonna feel genuine to you. I do use a lot of the people around me as well. I also try to give back. I'll find quotes and I'll like, oh my gosh, this totally, we're talking about this thing. So I try to give that back to people a lot, because I'm like, said you wanted to work on that, so that's part of that feedback thing. So I try to give it back if I can.
I love quotes. I get a daily quote in my inbox. A lot of people who work with me know this, and whenever I get one that reminds me of someone, I send it to them, and that's a great way to connect with people. That can be one of your 2 a month, right? I have definitely done that, like, hey, this reminded me of you. I do have a mentor, and like Rachelle, I also had a really amazing, strong female boss when I made the transition from accounting into HR that I've stayed in touch with, and I think she kind of set me on a great path, so similar to what you were saying. And I think one of the things that's helpful to me about the mentor is just they have such a different perspective, because they're not here in the moment and in the day-to-day. And I often find it's such a great way to look at things when you've set your mind on, I'll just use the promotion as the example, like this is what I'm driving towards, this is what I'm getting. And sometimes when I've met with her about whatever it is, like this is what I'm driving to, like she said to me, maybe there's a reason why it's not happening, Val, and maybe you need to think about that. And there have been some great times where I've been like, yeah, I never thought about it from that way. And you get this sort of tunnel vision. So I think it's so nice to have, whether it's an official mentor or informal mentor, just someone that has that outside perspective, that you're so close to it and focused on it in this particular way that you miss a lot of other learning that could be happening from it. So I appreciate that.
Totally agree. I don't have a mentor right now. I should now, listening to you guys, but I also have had, I know, another hour out of my night. I've had really good people along my career too, just telling me like you're off track. And I've always, had that rule of thumb, and I tell my team too, where you're going to learn more from your really crappy bosses than your good ones. And it's funny to say that, but it's watching other people. It's being in meetings or settings where you're like, I shouldn't be doing that, or I should be doing that. You try to absorb as much as you can, along the way, because there's a ton of opportunities that you guys may not see or we don't see, where you realize, oh, that's really good how they do that, or that's that's not what I should be doing. And so the advice I'd give you guys is, watch for some of those opportunities at times, because there's a lot of activity in this business alone that you can learn from. When you have people around you. The second thing I would say is just surround yourself, and I've said this entire conversation, you've got to surround yourself with people that support you, that give you feedback constantly. As Tosha was talking about feedback, ask for it. You'll hear people say, I never get feedback. I never know what I'm doing. And, that gives me heartburn, where I'm like, take control of the situation. Ask for feedback. You ask your colleagues, or you ask your boss, or, if you find yourself in that situation where you're not getting it, I would say that's your fault. That's not your manager's fault, or that's not the people around you. That's your fault. You should be asking for it, and you should continue to put your boss or your leadership in uncomfortable situations when they're not giving that to you, to say, no, you owe me that, and I'm going to force you to do that for me. So take control of it, take control of the situation. But I would lie to tell you that I have a mentor. I've had them over my career, but I just have a tendency to just get that feedback from the people that I work with and around me.
I think another thing that's important that my mentor reminds me of is there are different parts of you. We have like 20 different parts of ourselves, right? Whether it's your creative part, it's your mom part, it's your work part, it's whatever. And you honor different parts at different points in your life, like what we were talking about in the prioritizing, but they're all part of you, right? And you have to figure out which piece is more important right now, or this part of me is feeling this way, and well, why is that? And so you come at it from a different, so I find that's an interesting way of looking at things. It's not an all or nothing. These are all parts of you, and you have these feelings for a reason, for whatever part is more dominant at that point in your life. And I think that's a really helpful way of looking at things too. Just helps me.
Cool. Well, we have a few more minutes. I know Tosha's time management is big, so I know you have a presentation after this. So I think we'll just open it up to questions from everyone here, so that way, if anyone has any, we'd love to hear from you.
None.
Oh, come on.
We did such a good job.
I like it.
What can male leaders in this company do to help support strong female leaders?
That's a great question.
Should I say it again for the mic? Okay.
Yeah.
He asked, what can male leaders do to help form strong women leaders here at DISH? Yeah.
The only thing that comes to mind when you say that is don't make it a male-female thing.
That's exactly what I was
But we do
gonna
have
say.
differences, and so I think valuing some of the differences is probably a good thing. I mean, we have strengths in different areas. You talk about those different pieces of us, supporting personal choices and being open to communication. You mentioned, if you need to go home because your kid has a baseball game, I mean, I know those seem petty, and it's like, well, of course I'll let you go. But I think sometimes when I have used the phrase, and you all could relate to this, I've said, I need a wife. And I say this because I need someone who can help me with all the mom stuff, and those of you that have kids can relate. I don't have someone who could go do the grocery shopping, so I'm also grocery shopping, and my kids are like, there's nothing for lunch, and I'm dealing with all these things. And I think
for dinner.
yeah, and I think just being open and honest, knowing you, how you are, Jeremy, you are very open and honest, and I think you're very approachable, and I think you're already doing some great things. So I think if other male leaders are watching this, they should come talk to you. But I do think being open is probably the number one thing.
Yep. Open dialogue, communication.
And I think just figuring out what each individual needs, or what it is. It's not a male-female thing. I think it's an individual human thing. Like, what does each person need, right?
Totally agree.
Knowing your employees' priorities is probably the best. Yeah.
In your career, you've likely managed a mostly or all male team, and do you have any suggestions or pointers for that specifically, and did you run any obstacles and differences with that versus managing other women?
They both have their challenges.
Managing people is probably one of the most difficult things. We just talked about making it about each person, and I do truly, I have a few people here who report to me, but I truly do I know each person individually in my organization. I will say, as a woman, I tend to be, and those of you that know me, I'm very verbose and kind of sharing a lot of things. I've learned a lot about my people and what level of detail. Some personality types, they want it succinct. So they'll come in, I'll be like, okay, I need this, 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 and expectations are set very at that level. And then others will come in and they're open to hearing all the internal dialogue that I have around it. And so I manage each person very differently. There's no like better or worse way of doing it. I really do make it about the person. And I've worked for women, I've worked for men. I really just get to know people, and it has been my success has come from that by not just being the same. There are a couple people who have left my office, and a few days later they'll come, days later now, and they'll be like, I still really don't know what you want me to do. I'm like, wow. How did that happen? I thought I said this. Well, it could have been this, or it could have been this. You weren't really clear on which way you want it done. I'm like, that was up to you. Like, I thought I left it open to you to come up with the solution. Oh, I could do that myself? I'm like, yeah. So it's interesting when you actually, when you're having those conversations and you maybe see some of that body language that Kara mentioned, you're like, are we on the same page? Repeat back to me what I just said, and you'll find very quickly how that person needs you to communicate with them. So I think from my perspective, and I've managed mostly male teams in IT, yeah. And I've had people who are very chauvinistic, and and I've just come at that straightforward. I'm just like, hold on a second, this is a working environment. And so you just got to sometimes just say what's coming to mind with a professional. Yeah. Sorry, HR is like, whoa, but I called it like it is. I've called it like it is. I'm like, are we having a problem here? No. I'm like, okay, just pointing out when things get uncomfortable sometimes, but that's really about the person, not broad stroke.
Yeah.
I mean, I generally think 90% of the challenges or issues or whatever you want to say as a manager all come down to communication in some form or another, right? I mean, it's always about that piece.
Yeah, and don't let it, your internal dialogue is probably playing against you more than what's going on with the person that you're managing. When you start going, oh, what if he thinks I'm, oh, you're done. You got to deal with that inside.
That's where the calling it out is.
Yeah.
handy.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Totally agree.
I'm a big fan of calling it out.
Just say it how it is.
Say it how it is.
Yeah.
Let's talk about it.
Honesty is the best thing within HR's. Sorry.
Sometimes you have to choose your words carefully.
And choose your battles for that matter. But you have people reference, you can ask questions. So.
How important is education to you guys' career, whether it be on-the-job training, graduate school, et cetera?
That's a great question.
I haven't gone to graduate school. I'd like to, just because it's a personal goal of mine. That's totally personal. I don't think my career, my job says that I need to do that. For me, and especially here at Dish, one of the things that I have learned is on-the-job training is there's no better training. Okay. I have been hit with so many things here in this role and just in my career that has taught me more than any books could ever tell me. In fact, are completely different than what the books taught me. And so I think on-the-job to me is, I don't know, it's been the best for me and very valuable.
I'd agree. I did not get my master's. I was at a point in my career where I was so fast-tracked and learning so much that it just wasn't a priority for me, to just be honest. And then I got to the point where I was like, well, now I'm ready to start a family, and I knew that I couldn't do it all. So it's really, case-by-case basis of I'm not one to read books, as these guys, there's these ladies are. It's dependent on what you're looking for and what type of growth you're looking for. I would not say, though, that to be successful in a career that you have to have graduate school. Sometimes on-the-job training is better. But it's really case by case.
Yeah. And mine, sorry, you asked the question. I was looking for the face. So in my situation, when I made that pivot of deciding I was in a job and I had been 20 years graduated from my undergrad, I went to my VP at the time and I said, I think I'm going to go back to school and I want to get my MBA. And he's like, awesome, that's perfect timing for you. And it was the right time for me. I did an executive MBA program, and it was great for my confidence. It taught me things that I didn't know I was interested in. It reminded me of things I had learned 20 years before. Was it necessary? I can't say that it was necessary, but I can say that I had not been promoted until I got my MBA, which is not the case for everyone, as you can hear. But I do feel like it puts me at par with some of the other people within the industry and within IT. So I felt like it was the right choice for me. And so I think it's really personal.
Yeah, it is.
Personal. But it's a huge financial commitment and
time too.
And time. Yeah, my marriage hanging on by a thread, and it put a lot of stress on the situation. So I think you just have to play it by kind of what you want. Yeah. As she said, there really isn't any balance. I actually, in our last the book club, I mentioned that the coach, like the person that they give you in the MBA program, she gave me some really good advice, and hers was the things that you prioritize in life. So for me, it's work and my family, and at that time my MBA program. She said, never in 1 week should the number one thing in your priority be the same thing. So if you can vary those things. And so this week, you know you have a big paper due at school, make that be your number one. And your family understands, and you explain to them, I have a big paper and whatever. And then the next week, maybe it's your family because they took a hit, and then work. And by balancing that, you may not get a 4.0. In this case, that's because it was in reference to MBA, or you may not necessarily rock that presentation that I'm missing right now at 1 o'clock. You may not be like feeling like you did your best, but the thing you prioritized should make you feel good. And it helped me with guilt during that whole time. It was a long 18 months. So, yep, that's mine. Any others?
Any last ones?
The only thing that I had, because there was a last question on here, which was a wrap up, and these guys were giving me a hard time because I wrote down my thoughts on it, because I can't remember things. One of the things that said, if you could give one piece of advice to people here today to advance your careers, what here at Dish, or what would I say? The number one thing I'd say, and I think we've all kind of said this, is know yourself. And in everything we've talked about, whether it be talking honestly or what your career is, what you value, what you prioritize, what you value today may be different than what you value tomorrow. Constantly look at those things about yourself and just know what they are. And it'll really help you to be solid inside. So when you get hit with things from the outside, you're able to kind of balance it, weight it out. Is this important to me? And once a year, reevaluate those things. I just think, once a year, just look down and go, gosh, kind of, and by writing it down, you'd be very surprised at when you make decisions and you don't understand why you're making decisions, that filter that you use, you'll be like, oh yeah, that's because my number one thing is like this responsibility. I mean, my shoulders are heavy from responsibility, but when I make decisions, I know exactly why I did it, because I value responsibility. So it's just one of those things, really know yourself. That was my piece of advice.
Yeah.
Any other last pieces, ladies, before we wrap up?
I gave all mine.
And you said that too, so I just was, yeah.
Well, thank you guys so much for coming.
Thank you.
I hope you
Thanks for
enjoyed it, everybody.